Imagine waking up to this in your room in the middle of the night. I have to give you a warning for this case. Please don't watch if you're easily disturbed. Now, what makes this case so unnerving is that this man could literally be your relative, your husband, your neighbour. It was 1957 on the Channel Island of Jersey. A young woman waited innocently at a bus stop. Suddenly she was startled by a man coming up behind her and wrapping a rope round her neck. He dragged her to a field and brutally arred her before fleeing. She was traumatized, but thankfully still alive. Soon there were multiple victims reporting similar crimes. The women reported that the mystery attacker smelt really musty. Then in 1960, the attacks would become even more horrifying. On the 14th of February, a 12-year-old boy woke in the night and was startled. A terrifying man was stood at the foot of his bed in a horrifying rubber mask. He was also wearing nail-studded wristlets. Like in his initial attacks, the intruder tied a rope around the victim's neck. He dragged the boy into a field and arred him. Shortly after, he broke into the cottage of a woman and her daughter in the middle of the night. It was 1:30 a.m. and the woman was absolutely terrified by the noise of someone entering her home. She grabbed the phone to ring for help, but the intruder had cut the telephone lines. The woman managed to escape and call for help, but by the time she'd got back, the attacker had arred her teenage daughter. The mystery attacker left a trail of terror everywhere he went. He was systematically targeting houses with children inside. He'd break in and arr them wearing the hideous rubber mask. One of his victims was a boy of just 8 years old. Residents in the local area were understandably terrified. They all feared being the next victim of the man that they were calling the Beast of Jersey. Now, police initially blamed a local fisherman for these attacks off literally no evidence, and it was so compelling that the locals got wind of this and burned his house down. The innocent man left the area, but they knew it wasn't him because the attacks continued. The real culprit was a man named Edward Paisnell. He was a seemingly normal man with a wife. Horrifically, he was actually volunteering at the time, looking after vulnerable children. There were rumours that he was abusing both the children in his care and the staff. Meanwhile, investigators were taking ages to figure out who the Beast was. In 1966, a letter arrived at the police station from the Beast, and it stated, "My dear sir, I think that it is just the time to tell you that you are just wasting your time, as every time I have done what I always intended to do, and remember it will not stop at this, but I will be fair to you and give you a chance. I have never had much out of this life, but I intend to get everything I can now. I have always wanted to do the perfect crime. I have done this, but this time let the moon shine very bright in September, because this time it must be perfect, not one but two. I am not a maniac by a long shot, but I like to play with you people. You will hear from me before September, and I will give you all the clues, just to see if you can catch me. Yours very sincerely, Wait and See." He continued to break into homes and attack people. It wasn't until 1971, when Edward got pulled over for going across the traffic lights on a red light, that things would all start to unfold. Police found the terrifying mask inside his car and also the coat with nails around the wrists. He was arrested and ultimately found guilty of the string of horrific crimes. He was given 30 years in prison. He was actually let out in 1991 on good behaviour, but had a heart attack and died shortly after.
This husband was on TV pleading for his wife to come home, but was she ever really missing at all? On November 2nd, 2016, 39-year-old Sherry Papini sent her husband Keith a text message asking if he would be home for lunch. Keith responded by saying no, and that was it. Later that day, Keith arrived home and was surprised to find it empty. His wife Sherry was nowhere to be found. He then immediately began to track down Sherry's cell phone, and it actually pinged less than a mile away from the family's home. Keith immediately ran to this location, and that's when he found Sherry's cell phone, her earbuds, and strands of her hair. He immediately reported his wife as missing, and the search for Sherry began. Now, this search was intense. Detectives spoke to so many people, and the media picked up on the case right away. Everyone's main theory was that Sherry had been abducted. Weeks passed without any answers until November 24th, 2016. This is when Sherry was found on the side of the road. People just couldn't believe that Sherry had been found and that she had been found alive. Everyone was just so happy to have Sherry back. However, that happiness was short-lived because the truth of what happened to Sherry was eventually revealed. This true crime documentary series follows the 6-year journey from Sherry's disappearance to her discovery to finding the truth and all the effects it had on communities across the country. If you want to hear more about this shocking story, make sure to check out Perfect Wife: The Mysterious Disappearance of Sherry Papini, out on Hulu June 20th.
Whatever happened to Darcy Lynn? Part 2. Part 1's already up on my page. After Darcy Lynn narrowly won America's Got Talent,
Darcy Lynn!
she then of course went on to perform in her own show in Vegas, as all America's Got Talent winners do. After this is typically when the winners face their biggest challenge, and Darcy Lynn absolutely excelled, performing and going on massive shows such as Ellen DeGeneres, and performing with Pentatonix. It was pretty clear that Darcy Lynn was probably gonna make it pretty far. And even after a year, she was still staying in the media, as she made appearances on Nickelodeon shows, The Kelly Clarkson Show, and multiple trips back to America's Got Talent. She's continued to thrive. But recently it's been clear that she's going to be giving up ventriloquism. Although she did say it's always going to be a part of her life, she's pursuing music as a solo artist and a writer. She's also doing very well on social medias and YouTube, so if you do like her story, make sure to go check her out. Guys, thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like and follow.
Once in a while, we come across an ancient artifact that's so insanely old that it just does not fit into any of our timelines. That would be an out-of-place artifact, or OOPArt, and we ain't talking about the blatantly fake ones over here. As I'm sure you've seen the Babylon Nokia, this Nokia-looking cell phone with ancient Sumerian digits on it, which I'm pretty sure is just a prank. These old iron pipes found in China hold more validity to them, known as the Baigong pipes, found near the Chinese Mount Baigong, which appears to host a pyramid-shaped mound with a saltwater lake inside. And beneath the surface of this area, several hollowed out, rusted iron pipes running into the mountain were uncovered, ranging from 18 inches in diameter to as thin as a noodle. What makes these special is that researchers have found the pipes to be over 150,000 years old after performing dating analyses on them, made during a time that our primate ancestors were supposed to be roaming the earth, far before any civilization began to form. This right here is an out-of-place artifact, and we've got a whole bunch of them that make even less and less sense as we go on. Humans didn't start working with metal until about 10,000 BC at the earliest, let alone developing a sophisticated underground water transport system like we see here. No one really knows where or how these pipes came to be, and they're found all around the area. Believe it or not, this is actually the newest OOPArt on our list, so shit just keeps on getting older from here. Just like up in the Ural Mountains in Russia, archaeologists found finely crafted microscopic metal parts 10 meters beneath the surface. They were embedded in rock that was calculated to be about 300,000 years old, making these bits around the same age. But the shapes are far too intricate to be naturally forming, and they even tried pinning them on stray missile parts that fell from the sky. But they were much too deep in the rock to have been recently fallen, and they had no other way of getting there. These pieces of alleged ancient nanotechnology were also less than a millimeter long and made of tungsten, a material commonly used in spacecraft. Also found deep underneath the ground in Rockwall County, Texas, lies a wall made of rock. Known as the Great Wall of Texas, it was uncovered in a layer of earth dated to 400,000 years old, way before our primate ancestors were able to build such formations or even step foot in America. Some geologists absolutely insist it's a naturally occurring formation known as clastic sand dikes, but I mean, just look at them. Measuring up to 40 feet in height at some points, you can literally see the shape of the bricks and the mortar holding them together in this wall. This is how real clastic sand dikes look like. Pretty natural, right? And this is the Great Wall of Texas. You be the judge, but clearly there's quite a bit of controversy around this one. Similar to the Koso artifact, what appears to be a spark plug or an electrical device of some sort, encased in a geode that would have taken 500,000 years to form, and the only way an object can be stuck inside of one like this is if the geode formed around it, meaning this ancient spark plug would have to be around the same age. X-rays performed of the artifact revealed a metal cylinder inside with a screw-like ending, indicating it may have operated as a spark plug. Needless to say, our primitive ancestors were nowhere near developing such technology 500,000 years ago, and many pointed it to being a hoax. But the further back in time we go, the harder these become to explain. Case in point, this is the Nampa figurine, found in Idaho in 1889, 300 feet beneath the surface. The layer of clay it was found in was confirmed by the US Geological Survey to be over 2 million years old. Esteemed geologist George Frederick even went to investigate the area and confirmed that the red iron oxidation on the clay figurine matched exactly with the 2 million year old clay layer in a way that couldn't have been faked, making this a 2 million year old clay figurine, way before before any even remotely modern humans were thought to live on Earth, so was this even made by humans? There's a fossilized human finger that might point us in the right direction. So, a bit of background. The oldest recorded human ancestor fossil we've ever found is about 3.2 million years old, belonging to Lucy, one of our primate ancestors. But now, this fossilized finger right here was found in a Cretaceous limestone formation in Texas. Cretaceous meaning it's over 100 million years old. 100 million years. We're talking the age of dinosaurs right here, far before any proto-human primates were even close to roaming the earth. This was our closest ancestor during that period, so whose finger's that? Which gets even crazier with the Kaluga screw found in a meteor crash site in Russia. That's a metal screw embedded into an asteroid rock, and studies show that the iron and silicon of the screw and rock have physically fused into one another, meaning the screw could not have been a new addition to the rock, which was dated, get ready for this, 300 million years old. Other scientists tried saying this is actually an ancient sea creature called a crinoid, despite it being made of metal. Similar to this refined aluminum machine part found encased in coal in another Russian mine, accurately dated to 300 million years old as well, hinting at scattered remains of some advanced civilization that existed long ago. Which brings us to the infamous London hammer, discovered in London, Texas in the 1930s. An iron hammerhead with a wooden handle encased in rock. Which, let me remind you, rocks don't just form around man-made objects out of the blue. Objects embedded into rock or coal this deep are typically preserved as the rock forms around them over the course of millions of years, as is the case with fossils, which in this case was found in a layer of rock over 400 million years old, the alleged age of the rock and hence of the hammer as well. As with many of these, a lot of speculation around this one, but still interesting to think about a human tool over 400 million years old. The wooden handle is also said to have been partially turned into coal, a process that takes millions of years, which is nothing compared to the Klerksdorp spheres. Round, smooth objects with fine grooves around them found in South African mines. Many claim these are naturally forming mineral deposits, but still others that shapes and patterns like these are just not possible in nature. Made from a metallic outer material and a fibrous interior, 200 of these spheres were found in a mineral deposit over 2.8 billion years old. Back when Earth was still a baby, and apart from a few plants, life barely even existed yet. But then again, we claim life didn't exist back then because we haven't been able to find any evidence of it. Could this be it?
There's been a horrific mass shooting at a grocery shop in Arkansas. On the 21st of June, a horrific incident unfolded at a grocery store that proved to be fatal. Emergency services were alerted to a mass shooting at the Mad Butcher grocery shop near Little Rock. Bystanders reportedly initially thought that the shots were actually fireworks going off. One eyewitness realized what was going on and that this was a shooting and took his phone out and started to record. Officers raced to the scene and were horrified by what they found. They identified an active shooter and shot him in order to detain him. Tragically, 3 innocent lives were taken. Several other members of the public were injured in this senseless attack. There was a total of 11 members of the public that were wounded. The shooter is now in custody after sustaining non-life-threatening injuries. 2 police officers were wounded in the shootout with the suspect. The shooter is reportedly 44-year-old Travis Posey. He is believed to be from New Edinburgh. As of yet, a motive for this horrific shooting is not known.
This is the extremely controversial Cannibal Cop case. If you have never heard of the Cannibal Cop case before, pay attention because we're going to have a lot to discuss by the end. Gil Volley was living a double life. By day, Gil was an extremely respected police officer with the NYPD. He was recently married and also the new father to a little baby girl. But by night, the cop, husband, and father would go on dark web chat rooms to discuss his disturbing fantasies with strangers under the screen name Girl Meat Hunter. Gil would discuss his fantasies of kidnapping, SAing, unaliving, cooking, and eating women. And remember, this is not only a cop, but a newlywed and a new girl dad. But he was also deeply interested in eating young women. Gil would go on these chat rooms and talk with these strangers about all these things that he wanted to do. But if any of them would ever ask if Gil was being serious, he would always say, no, this is all make-believe and my fantasy. But at some point, it seemed to stop being just make-believe. In the chat rooms, Gil would say that he planned to disable his victims with chloroform and then he would go on Google and search how to make chloroform. Gil Googled how to abduct someone. He Googled how to eat someone. Gil would discuss a potential victim with these random weirdos that he would meet online, and then he would go to work the next day and search them up in the police database so he could find their address and more things about them. On these dark web chat rooms, Gil even discussed his plan to kidnap one of his college friends named Kimberly. Gil went as far as to create a blueprint of everything he would need that he even called abducting and cooking Kimberly. And after creating this blueprint to abduct and cook her, Gil actually hit up Kimberly to catch up, and they went out to lunch together. He even brought his newlywed wife and his new baby. Gil would even upload photos to these weird dark web chat rooms of women from his real life that he actually knew, using their real names and his plans to kidnap, essay, unalive, cook, and eat them, including his new wife, the mother of his child, who are both sleeping in the other room while Gil is staying up all the time on these creepy websites. And speaking of Gil's wife, at the same time, she's making her own Google searches. Things like, "My husband doesn't love me anymore." She was starting to feel her husband push her away and really not interested anymore, and she actually started to think that he was having an affair. So she actually uploaded spyware to his computer, and after what she found, I bet she wished her husband was only cheating. She's obviously extremely disturbed about what she's seeing. She doesn't know if any of it's real or if he's done any of it yet. She actually took it all and turned it into the FBI, and Gil was arrested and found guilty of conspiracy to kidnap and the unauthorized use of a law enforcement database. And this is where the controversies in this case starts. Gil never actually did any of the things that he talked about online. But the FBI argued that the things like the Google searches using the database to find information and addresses about the people he was discussing, the Kimberly blueprint, and then hitting her up to meet up were all evidence that he was planning to act out the things that he talked about, which is conspiracy, especially since he was talking about it with other people. But Gil also had a lot of supporters that said that Gil was arrested for his thoughts. And in the United States, you can't be arrested for thinking bad things. I don't know if I personally believe that Gil had any intention of acting out these dark fantasies. I just don't know. But I do find them extremely disturbing, and I would not want someone that thought that and had fantasies about that being a police officer. But I am extremely interested to read all your guys' opinions. Do you think what he did constituted conspiracy? Do you think a crime was committed here at all? It's so tricky because honestly, a lot of what Gil would discuss was clearly fantasy. Like, Gil would tell these people online that in his basement, he had a dungeon where he planned to keep the women that he abducted. But Gil did not have a basement. He lived in an apartment complex. The only basement in the building was a shared laundry facility that everyone in the building used. Gil mentioned that he had a van, a secluded house in the woods, an oven large enough to fit a human inside, but none of it was true. In the chats, Gil would also clarify quite often that everything he was saying was fantasy, make-believe, not true. Except on one occasion where he told someone that he was just afraid of getting caught, and if he could guarantee that he could get away with it, he would do all these things. In the United States, we have a law that you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person is guilty of the crime that you are accusing them of. Well, after serving about 2 years in prison, a judge decided that they didn't do that in Gil's case, and he acquitted him of his charges. So today, Gil, Cannibal Cop, is out free. He now does construction and writes extreme horror novels, because of course he does. Gil's wife did divorce him after all this came to light. She was also awarded full custody of their daughter. He tried until a couple years ago to get some kind of custody, but eventually gave up. I'm so interested to read your guys' comments on this case. I'm really hoping we can keep debating and discussing because I haven't even fully made up my mind on where my opinion lies. So I would love to get your guys' feedback so you guys can help me make up my mind. If you did watch to the end of this video, thank you so much. Leave some orange emojis in the comments so I know that you saw this.
A free energy device that's been hidden from the public since the 1970s. There's actually quite a few of these free energy machines going around right back to Tesla, but are any of them real? This device is allegedly made using the debris recovered from the now famous OG Roswell UFO crash site in 1947. One of the first ever widely publicized UFO crashes in history near Roswell, New Mexico, and the government was quick to get involved. The military's initial official public statement was, yes, we recovered a flying saucer, and this was the government admitting it in 1947. Then the next day they were just like, oh snap, never mind, it was just a weather balloon accident, which they stood by for decades, despite dozens of eyewitness accounts of the crash site insisting that the material recovered from the debris had some otherworldly properties. Since we had no internet back then, people just kind of forgot about it for 30 years. But in 1978, ufologist Stanton Friedman dug up this incident and brought it back to public light. And the Roswell incident started to pick up steam, getting featured in books, TV shows, and people began to question it again. So to shut everyone up, the Pentagon ran an official investigation on the situation in 1994 and concluded it was now a high-tech balloon recovered from classified military project called Mogul. Your classic, the government investigated itself and found nothing wrong situation. We later found out that almost everyone who encountered the debris back in 1947 was contacted by the government, who told them to keep their mouths shut. Even radio stations like KGFL admitted decades later that the US military called them back then and specifically told them not to report on the Roswell situation, clearly trying to hide something. But the real deal here is everyone had the exact same thing to say about the metal scraps from the crash site. Countless reports claimed the debris was a very thin tinfoil-like material that was bendable but would snap back into place with no creases when you let go of it. You also couldn't burn it, cut it, tear it, or puncture it despite it being as thin as tinfoil. It got to be known as memory metal that remembers its original shape, an alien technology material familiar among several UFO crash sites. Because it wasn't just in Roswell. The Varginha, Brazil UFO crash site in 1996 had people saying the exact same thing about the debris. A seemingly indestructible metallic-like foil that you could crumple up and it would just pop back out in pristine condition. Turns out this metal is real. Like, it actually exists, revealed to the public in 1959 just shortly after Roswell by the Naval Ordnance Laboratory as nitinol, a nickel and titanium alloy that remembers its original atomic shape and snaps back into it when heated up, known as an SMA, a shape memory alloy. Memory metal. Sound familiar? How convenient that it was invented just a decade after Roswell. Nitinol was, and still kind of is, a revolutionary metal used by NASA in their Mars rovers, surgical devices, and even eyeglasses. But there are even earlier, lesser known reports of this metal that have gone under the radar. Like in this unclassified document from 1949, just 2 years after Roswell, written by the Battelle Memorial Institute, a technology development company, to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, which is largely believed where the Roswell crash was studied. That outlines in the months immediately following the Roswell crash, the Air Force contracted Battelle to work on titanium alloys with novel properties. Just another coincidence, showing that Battelle may have been the defense contractor hired for reverse engineering this UFO material. Now, to be fair, nitinol is nowhere near as pliable and flexible as this UFO material claims to be, and it does require heat to shapeshift. But nitinol could have easily just been the commercially available version that they were able to reverse engineer from the original material. And it lines up quite well with the recent UFO sightings in the last few years, many of which report and even show the UAPs themselves morphing and changing their shapes mid-flight, which kinda looks like memory metal. UFO behavior descriptions that were deemed absolute nonsense in the 40s that turned out to be plausible at the very least almost 70 years later? Where have I heard that before? Oh yes, Bob Lazar. Remember this guy who told the world in the 90s the government's working on alien spacecraft and was called crazy for it? Then a few decades later, the Pentagon fully admits, yes, we've encountered UAPs in our skies. And this Freedom of Information Act request by Anthony Bragalia to the Defense Intelligence Agency revealed that the government is indeed testing on UFO debris. The declassified 154-page DIA document shows, in addition to remembering their original shape when bent or crushed, the retrieved debris possessed extraordinary capabilities, including the potential to make things invisible or slow down the speed of light. All in this report. Bob also said that he worked on an antimatter reactor that could generate its own gravitational force for a propulsion-less aircraft engine that could move outside the realm of our known physics. Labeled a nutcase, lying through his teeth, looking for attention in the 90s. And now the UAP reports of the last few years all stated these exact behaviors of craft movement. Erratic patterns that seem to defy physics and engines with no visible propulsion. As well, he stated that an that element 115, one not found on Earth, was the main source of fuel behind these reactors, a laughable suggestion. In 2003, element 115 was synthesized and officially added to the periodic table as moscovium. Although we haven't been able to stabilize it yet, this is clearly progress. He also suggested that the government is likely experimenting on extraterrestrial alien bodies, an absolute crackpot, right? In 2023, David Grosh admits to it in his famous non-human biologics quote, and the Mexican government literally reveals full-ass alien bodies to the world. You see, almost every claim made about UFOs from the 50s all the way to the 2000s was deemed at the time sheer insanity peddled by nut jobs. Decades go by, governments admit the truth, and everyone just kind of goes, oh, no way, I guess it's true, and the hype dies out. People lose interest until something new comes out, like those free energy machines I talked about earlier. Sometime in the 70s, after nitinol, the miraculous memory metal, was invented, this TV spot came out that featured perpetual motion engines which converted nitinol into energy without any fuel spent. Listen to what this guy had to say.
Nitinol engines as a real potential for the future. Since the energy to run the engines is in effect free, it's waste heat.
The atomic memory properties of nitinol is used together with hot water and cooling to continually expand and contract the metal to create motions like these, which are then converted into energy. The problem is you need a source of heat to heat the nitinol up and perpetuate this motion, and heat ain't free. Well, we do have natural hot springs, as well as geothermal sources, meaning deep within the earth where all the lava is, that could support that. But even then, you need to actually build the power stations that generate this nitinol energy, as well as distribute and maintain them, which all cost money. Sure, the stations may pay themselves off after 2 years or however long and operate free after that, but that's no different than any other renewable energy source like solar, wind, these cool wave buoys. Not exactly free energy, unless I'm missing something here. But remember that nitinol is just a commercially available tip, and I think you all know how I feel about just the tip. The original shape-shifting alien memory metal is likely still being studied, or maybe even successfully recreated in ultra-classified government projects, because the videos of those UAPs are clearly doing something way crazier than what nitinol can do. Maybe this real UFO memory metal does have properties that are so advanced that free energy devices like these would be fully possible. And governments, the global elites, are afraid of releasing it into our society as they're multi-trillion-dollar enterprises, and to be fair, the economy itself would likely crumble. So they have no choice but to keep it hidden. Remember guys, before anyone starts crying about misinformation, these are all just theories. I spitball interesting ideas and try to activate new parts of your brain. So if you can't handle them, why'd you even get this far into the video? How about those other free energy sources going around, like these Congo rocks, terrestrial ground energy, or Tesla's famous Wardenclyffe Tower that pulled atmospheric energy from the sky similar to that of the alleged Tartarian Empire? What if those were actually real and suppressed from the public? Because we might have to look into those next.
I'm Ian Van Gogh, and this 2023 gory horror film feels a lot like Feast, but not as fun. Let's talk about it, but first, hit that follow button for daily horror movie content and reviews. And today, we're talking about Craving. A group of drug addicts are besieged by a group of mysterious figures inside a rural bar. So this feels like Feast meets The Purge with a creature of the week included. It's super bloody and gory, which I loved, but it's another one that takes itself too seriously. The story is an interesting concept, but the movie definitely drags on a bit, and if someone isn't getting their face or limbs ripped off, I found myself not really caring about what was going on. The characters and acting ranged from decent to not great, but it was cool seeing Felissa Rose in this, even if it's only for a short time. Overall, I did enjoy it, but I didn't love it. The blood and gore is the highlight of the movie, and the special effects and makeup are fantastic. If you're looking for a lower budget, gory creature feature, then definitely check it out. It's streaming on Tubi right now. If you've seen Craving, let me know what you think of it in the comments. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
This is everything that happened on the news today, but it's going to be simplified in 60 seconds. The infamous and holy man of the USA has just officially signed the TikTok ban into law. Basically, we have to wait and see if a federal judge is now going to block the bill or not. A new report has just found that only 26% of Americans actually get at least 8 hours of sleep. I don't know why they chose that photo, but that's crazy. Scientists have just discovered that Uranus may be filled with a lot more methane than previously thought. Okay. NASA is still predicting that there's going to be a once-in-a-lifetime exploding star that could soon be visible to literally everybody on the planet. Basically, this star has already exploded, but since it's so far away, we just can't see the light yet, and they have no idea when we will. If you want to see this and you want to make sure you don't miss it, just add me and I'll let you know as soon as it happens. Every single airline is now officially required to refund passengers for canceled and delayed flights, literally cash on site. that's going to change a lot. The Voyager 1 is now officially sending usable data again for the first time since breaking down nearly 50 years into its deep space journey. That's a lot. Basically, the Voyager 1 is part of the Voyager program studying Jupiter and Saturn, Saturn's rings, and the larger moons of the two planets. It's good to know that he is now talking to us again. I give you these daily roundups every day, so make sure you add me and come back to me tomorrow.
This 11-year-old girl was forced to marry the adult that essayed her and got her pregnant. This case takes place in Florida. Sherry Johnson was only 8 years old when the adults in her life began to abuse her. Men from her mother's church and even her own stepfather began to essay her. By the time that she was only 9 years old, Sherry was pregnant, and she gave birth to her first child when she was only 10 years old. Child welfare began investigating Sherry's family and their church for good reason. Girls that are 9 years old just don't get pregnant. But her mother and the heads of their church decided that Sherry would marry the man that abused her and got her pregnant, 20-year-old Alfonso Tolbert, so that he would avoid prison time. Her own mother betrayed her, protecting the man that essayed her and abused her instead of protecting her. It's absolutely disgusting. Sherry was 11 years old when she was forced to marry the man that R-worded her. She said that she absolutely did not want to marry him, and nobody asked her what she wanted, not even the judge that granted her, at 11 years old, a marriage license. The abuse that Sherry was experiencing was now legal in the eyes of the law, and her 20-year-old abuser moved in to her family home because now he was her husband. Sherry was forced to drop out of elementary school so she could be a wife and a mother. And by the time that Sherry was 17 years old, she had had 6 children by her abuser. It's absolutely appalling and disgusting, and I can't even begin to try and put myself in that shoes. I mean, like, I am older than 17 years old, and I don't even feel like I'm ready for like 1 kid, let alone 6. It's so sad. Luckily, Sherry was granted a divorce, but unfortunately, I have no idea what happened to her abuser, Alfonso, afterwards. I have no idea where he went. I scoured the internet. If you do know what happened to him, let me know. I'm sure it wasn't anything that'll make me happy, like death or life in prison or anything, but if you have any updates about where that scummy rat is now, let me know in the comments. Today, Sherry is trying to use what happened to her for good to change the laws in the United States. She's a huge advocate against child marriage, and she's even written a book about her experience. You would think that child marriage is just a thing of the past in the United States, but you would be really surprised. It was actually legal in all 50 states up into 2018, which is not that long ago, guys. Marrying a child was legal in all 50 states only a couple years ago. Today, it is legal still in 38 states, and 20 of those states have no minimum age requirement for child marriage. That's so yucky. Look into your state laws. Look into your state laws, because it might surprise you. That's so yucky. No minimum age requirement for a child to get married. It's literally like legal statutory R-word. That's so disgusting. Oh my god. If you liked this video, I have no idea why. I guess it does have a happy ending. I mean, at the end, Sherry did get out of that abusive situation, and she's currently trying to fight for laws, and honestly, it's been working. She's been, really outspoken in the past couple years, and obviously states are finally starting to open their eyes off and realize maybe we shouldn't let 11-year-old children get married to their abusers. But if you watched the end of this video, thank you so much for listening to Sherry Johnson's case. If you guys would want to see more, stories similar to this, let me know in the comments. But I love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Wait, you're saying teleportation is real?
That's precisely what I'm saying. In the 1980s, there was a scientist named Richard Sanchez. He was a self-educated, eccentric inventor who worked out of his garage and was known amongst family to have a drinking problem. He was able to invent countless gadgets, most of which scientists today still do not understand. He did this without any funding, using materials he found at the local dump. Him and his grandson would sneak into at night. One day, his neighbors saw him using what is described as a portal gun in his backyard. Witnesses claim he was successfully able to teleport from one end of the backyard to the other. While most of them were amazed, some were concerned and called the police. When the police showed up, Richard and his grandson escaped in what is described as a makeshift, homemade aircraft. The Air Force ended up chasing the aircraft for hours until it appeared to leave the atmosphere. Despite a worldwide search, Richard Sanchez and his grandson were never seen again. The official story is that Richard's aircraft malfunctioned while flying over the Pacific and is in the bottom of the ocean somewhere. Many people do not believe this and theorize Sanchez was actually able to construct a space-traveling vessel, which combined with his portal gun allowed him to travel to different galaxies.